Let's continue then on this and bring in defense analyst Dean Wingrin. Dean, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for staying and agreeing to this interview. And now, of course, you've been listening to those various interviews that we've been having with our reporters that are on the ground at the Air Force Base in Centurion. So we know, of course, that the repatriation process of the 14 fallen soldiers was delayed by several days, but today families will finally receive their remains and start that process of peace, as we've just been hearing. So as we mark this symbolic moment, just give us your take on just how symbolic it is, not only, of course, for the SANDF, but also for the families of those fallen soldiers.
Good afternoon, and yes, it's incredibly symbolic. And the handing over ceremony is a very somber, moving ceremony, and I don't think there'll be many a dry eye there. The families have had to wait almost 3 weeks for this moment. There's been numerous delays, and it's understandable given the circumstances and the surrounding events in which the soldiers died, that it was very difficult getting them out of the immediate theatre. I think it was unfair of the minister and of the chief of the Defence Force to make promises as to exact dates, creating certain expectations. But and then even at the last moment this morning, sort of delaying the actual ceremony. But hopefully now they'll get a little bit of peace, get some closure, and the ability to move on once their loved ones have been buried.
Just from a military process and some form of symbolism from an honor perspective, what are we likely to see as the remains are then honored by the SANDF and significantly the president of the country, the commander-in-chief?
Yes, the military is very much a traditionalist kind of establishment, and everything is on tradition. So what we will see will be a time-honored ceremony where you would have seen previously there's the Hangar 4 at the airbase, and the 14 soldiers and their coffins will arrive there. They will be draped in South African flags, and then there'll be pallbearers representing the 4 arms of service, namely the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Military Health Services. So they'll be treated with the utmost respect, and each fallen soldier will be brought forward, and they will be paid due respect by the parade, and then there'd be the formal, as you say, handing over to the families. And from there, once that ceremony is over, the bodies will then be taken back to the funeral parlor that's responsible, and then it'll be the families themselves who will then decide exactly where and when they will have their loved ones buried. And the Defence Force will assist with that. And also each member will be afforded a full military burial, which means a guard of honor as well will be present and to honor the fallen as they are lowered into the grave. And they will pay the due salute and respect.
Absolutely. I want us now to draw on the words of President Cyril Ramaphosa made a few moments ago in Parliament, saying that he welcomes the debates, and the decision to deploy our armed forces to the DRC, and that the decision was not taken lightly. What have been your observations around this particular deployment, and how South Africa, importantly, has responded to the criticism and some of the concerns?
Yes, it's a very lively topic. And I think from the very first time the force was deployed from mid to late 2023, the actual troops arriving in the DRC in December 2023 for the SADC part of the mission. Of course, South Africa had been involved in the UN MONUSCO mission since at least 2013, or as an offensive and as peacekeepers since 1999. So when the SADC mission was established just over a year ago, a lot of people warned that South Africa is going in there together with Malawi and Tanzania. We cannot rely on the UN logistics to support them. And everything would have to be done by South Africa as the lead nation, supplying the most troops. And you cannot rely on anybody else for your own well-being. And therefore, you need to have a defense force which is well funded, so your troops and soldiers can be well trained, well equipped, and suitably capacitated. And the ex-US President Theodore Roosevelt from the early 1900s, one of his sayings was, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." And unfortunately, South Africa, in this case, it talks the talk, but it hasn't got the stick to back up that talk. And the underfunding of the Defence Force and, dare I say it, the defunding of the Defence Force over the last decade has just so crippled the Defence Force that the big stick is just not there. And yes, certainly you need a diplomatic solution to this. But, the politicians need to realize that the army is diplomacy just by another means, but it shouldn't be your primary weapon. And that is the difficulty. Was the president, was he suitably informed? Was he suitably briefed on the capacity of the Defence Force prior to this mission? And was anybody stifled or not allowed to say anything? Because the worst thing for a president or someone in charge is to have a whole lot of yes people around them. You need someone to actually speak the truth. And it'll be important to know, did he receive that briefing?
Yeah, and I mean, we continue, of course, to hear that there's a possibility that more troops could possibly be deployed, to the eastern DRC. I don't know how much of that, you have heard. But importantly, what do you make of, domestic calls to immediately withdraw all South African forces from the DRC, particularly the eastern part of the country? We heard, of course, Ronald Lamola, the Minister of International Relations, responding to that, debate that an abrupt withdrawal now is not even a tactical retreat at this point. It would be worse than a surrender. What should happen?
Well, I don't believe the minister in totality of what he was saying. But yes, we're in a very difficult position. South Africa has got a leading role in Africa and promoting peace and stability. And it's to South Africa's benefit that there is a peaceful and stable countries north of us, as well as to the east. But it's a difficult position. I agree, you cannot just summarily withdraw your troops and say, that's it, wash your hands and walk away. I think that will ruin South Africa's reputation forever, certainly for a long time. But I don't believe there's anything against. Certainly, we shouldn't make any hard decisions now. We've got to get our troops out of the immediate area of Goma and Sake, where they're surrounded by M23 and their Rwandan backers. Once we've got them out, then you can then take a talk, okay, what is the next stage? We have sent reinforcements north, both in terms of soldiers as well as equipment. And that is sort of partly, I think, also what I was talking about previously. You've got to carry a big stick as well while talking softly. You've got to have options. And it's good to see that we do have options. Whether those options are actually able to do anything is a very different conversation. But for the moment, I think we've got to have cool heads prevail. And I'm glad to see that the heated talk from both President Kagame of Rwanda and President Ramaphosa has toned down after those initial few days. And we hope that there's some good talks going on in the background as to how we can extricate our troops. And then see, together with the SADC, together with the East African community, what is the future of the forces, and how can everybody talk and try and get some more stability and as to what is happening, because I certainly don't see M23 withdrawing from Goma in the short term, and possibly even moving further south.
And I mean, Dean, I think you raise a very important point. You know, one of the other statements that was raised by President Ramaphosa today in Parliament is that South Africa proposed, you know, to the recent EAC East African Committee and the SADC summit that we saw in Tanzania, that in order to ensure peace in the DRC, direct negotiations and perhaps dialogue among state parties and non-state parties, importantly, including the M23 rebels, must resume. And this is also, you know, it needs a political solution somewhat. I think to the point that you're driving home in terms of having those discussions, because that is important at this point in time.
Indeed. We all are rather impatient. We all want our troops home and safe. But I think we've got to exercise a little bit of patience, try and put some faith into our political leaders and in the foreign affairs and in the UN, which is also taking a leading role in trying to get our troops out of the immediate situation. And the only way to do that is via talk.